Alrighty, we are back with Catalyst by Lisa Beeson. Chapter 29. We're getting it. Ari came through the white fog from her own dreamless sleep and found herself in a cage guarded by two ogre-like creatures wielding pikes atop the battlements of a black fortress. The world around her was a hellish landscape of ash-clouded air and volcanic rock, pitted with geysers spewing lava and razor-sharp onyx shards jutting up from the ground. Below her, warriors and soldiers from almost every age, with their various weapons and apparel, were fighting a savagely bloody battle against an army of what looked like ogres, winged demons, zombies, and a faceless shadow soldiers. Ari looked down at herself and saw that she was the same as she was in real life, except she was missing the zip tie scars around her wrists. She was dressed as some kind of warrior princess, clad in intricately decorated gold and leather armor and an alabaster tiara, bedecked with colorful jewels adorned her head. What in the world? She thought as she inspected the tiara in her hands. Ari! She looked up eagerly and scanned the battlefield full of chaos and carnage to find the one who called her name. Then she saw him. Cam. Focusing in, she saw that he was dressed as a knight riding a brilliantly white horse, slashing at enemies with a broadsword and ardently fighting his way towards the black fortress. He was a literal knight in shining armor, though, in truth, it wasn't his armor, which was stained in blood and gore, that was shining. It was him, a true soldier of light. She shouldn't have been able to hear him over the din of battle and at so great a distance, but it was his dream, and he desperately wanted her to hear him, so his consciousness allowed it. Ari! He screamed again, before skewering an ogre through the chest, then kicking at a zombie, which was grasping at him with his rotten hands. Cam managed to get his sword out of the ogre's chest just in time to decapitate the zombie before it had a chance to bite at his ankle. I'm coming! He said before spurring his mighty steed forward. Ari had resigned herself to the fact that she'd never see him again, that she had let him go, and he was better off without her. Yet here he was, dreaming of fighting his way across hell and through an army of monsters just to rescue her. Ari realized, as she watched him valiantly fight his way towards the fortress, that even as selfish as it was, she couldn't let go. She needed him. She needed his love, his strength, and his belief in her, for all that had to be overcome in real life. Then it occurred to her, why the heck am I standing here like an idiot? Settle down. Ari dropped the tiara and grasped the metal bars of the cage, using her sifting strength to bend them apart. When she had made a big enough space to slip through, she escaped her prison and shattered the knee of one of the ogre guards with a swift kick, took his pike, leaped off the battlement, then manipulated the molecules around her to land softly on the ground. Dodging the barbed arrows and winged demons were shooting down at everyone. She pivoted around a zombie and thrust the tip of the pike through the abdomen of an attacking shadow soldier, causing him to disintegrate in a puff of smoke. Well, that was easy enough. Using the body of a dying ogre as a boost, she leaped up and stabbed a particularly annoying winged demon in the chest, but instead of disappearing like the shadow soldier, it split into two smaller demons. Okay, that's a bit trickier. But she was game for the challenge. Attacking, dodging, and running her way towards Cam. It felt good to take out all her anger and aggression on the dream enemies, slashing and thrashing her way across the battlefield. When Cam and Ari had almost fought their way to each other, the ground began to shake and churn, causing Cam to get dislodged from his horse's back when it reared up in panic. Cam! Ari screamed when she saw him hit the ground. She was starting to run towards him when she was thwarted by an incredibly loud cracking sound, and the earth began to split and fall away, creating a vast ravine between them. Cam managed to get back on his feet amidst the tumult, and they stared helplessly at each other as the distance between them increased further and further apart. But then a look of fierce determination came over his face. and Ari knew what he was thinking. Cam, don't! It's too far! Nothing will stop me, Ari! I will get to you no matter what! He yelled back. And with that, he sprinted forward and launched himself from the edge of the ravine. Ari used all the strength she had to sprint forward and leap across the chasm, making up the distance he wouldn't be able to cross on his own. Consequences be damned. She only needed to touch him and everything would be okay. Their outstretched fingers were just about to meet when the white bank of fog suddenly appeared between them, and Ari fell through back into the darkness of her own dreamless sleep. Cam was abruptly torn from his dream by someone snapping their fingers and shaking his shoulder. Come on, Cam, wake up, Alvaro said. We're here. Cam instinctively shoved Alvaro away from him, confused and angry that he had been ripped away just as he was about to reach Ari. But as his head cleared, he realized that it had only been a dream. It wasn't really her. He must have fallen asleep without realizing it, his body finally giving in to exhaustion. Ever since Ari disappeared, every minute had been dedicated to finding her and getting her back. Enzo had seen everything. She wasn't taken by the suits like Val and Soren, as if that wasn't bad enough. She had run back into the clutches of evil incarnate, and he couldn't sleep until she was safe. After rubbing away the last vestiges of sleep from his eyes, he looked out the backseat window of Hugo's car to see a brown sign on the side of the road, which had the words Delphi Falls in big white letters on it, and under that in smaller font, Town of Pompeii, 1794. They had finally made it. Oh, I've got a call coming in. I don't know if that messes with the video at all. So I guess I'll just take a sip of soda while it rings. Okay, call over. And I only paused because I don't know if it affects anything or not. They had finally made it to the tiny hamlet of Delphi Falls, about 30 minutes outside of Syracuse. The church should be just down the road on the left, Alvaro said, and Hugo nodded. Wyatt was in the front passenger seat, busy texting someone, probably Randall, who was with the rest of the volunteer rescue crew back at the bed and breakfast. Yep, that's it. That's the church I saw, Alvaro said excitedly as he leaned forward between the two front seats to point at the old white federal-style church. And that's the time I saw on the clock. Cam had never seen a clock on a church steeple before, but he was more interested in the cemetery behind it, that was older than the church itself. That's where Alvaro said they were going to meet up with Cass, Jamie, and the guy Ari didn't recognize. Now we might finally be able to get some freaking answers. Hugo parked in front of the church. Alvaro was about to jump out when Wyatt reached back and grabbed the sleeve of his shirt to stop him. Hold on, Al. We need to approach this cautiously. We're going with you. Alvaro shook his head vehemently. No, the vision was clear. It was only me and Cam meeting them there. We're not going to risk losing more children, Wyatt insisted. Alvaro looked like he was about to explode with frustration. It's all right, man, Cam said to Wyatt, trying to defuse the situation by easing the man's hand away from Alvaro's sleeve. Ari knows and trusts these people. We'll be fine. She didn't know the man with them. You said that yourself, Wyatt countered. It's better to be safe than sorry. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of us, Cam assured him. And besides, we need you guys to keep an eye on the road. We'll stay in the car, Hugo said with a definitive nod of his head. Then he turned to look at Wyatt. If Alvaro saw only the two of them going into the cemetery, then we need to trust in that. Thanks, Hugo, Alvaro said with a grateful pat on his shoulder. He exited the car before Wyatt could protest further, leaving his ever-present sketchbook behind him on the seat. Cam got out and followed him, quickly making up the distance with his long strides. and they both entered through the gap between the church and a waist-high rock wall that bordered the entire cemetery. Cam shivered. Though the steamy summer evening was anything but chilly, he hated cemeteries. He couldn't help thinking about how all the faded names on those headstones had once been people with hopes and ambitions, but were now nothing more than bones and dust moldering in the ground. It never failed to remind him of just how fragile and impermanent life was, that it could all be ripped away in the blink of an eye. "There they are!" Alvaro said excitedly. The little guy was practically prancing in his haste. "Be cool, man," Cam cautioned him as they walked towards the three figures standing in the shade of the large tree behind the church. Tober had taught Cam many things while he was training him back at Ardamir. The guy was a man of very few words, but when he did talk, it resonated. "Always be aware. The enemy you can see should only worry you half as much as the enemy you can't." There were plenty of places to hide around this place, so while Alvaro was rushing to meet the three strangers, Cam was scanning their surroundings for anomalies or extra shadows behind the weathered gravestones in the golden light of the setting sun. As they approached a beautiful dark-skinned woman, who could only be the infamous Oracle, Cassandra St. Clair, gave them a brilliant smile and looked at them as if they were old friends. Cam knew that it was probably because she had seen them in her Oracle visions, but it still weirded him out a bit. "Well done, Alvaro. You have arrived right on time," Cass said in a deep, silky voice, accented with a rich southern cadence. Alvaro beamed under her praise, already completely smitten with her. Struggling here. Cam came up beside Alvaro, and Cass turned her knowing gaze on him. Her smile turned to a frown of concern as she walked over and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You look tired, Cam." She was looking at him in the same compassionate way his mom used to when she saw that he was hurt or upset, and it completely disarmed him. "I won't rest until I find her," he said. "I can't." The understanding in Cass's eyes nearly undid him. It was as if she was looking straight into his heart. She could see that Ari was the love of his life. She was the North Star in his sky. He had let her slip away to be taken by the shades. He hadn't protected her like he should have. And now she's gone and he's lost without her. "Your role in her life is far from over, sweet boy. Never give up hope," Cass whispered to him, and some of the weight lifted off his chest, and he could breathe a little easier. "Smarter, not..." Oh, wait. What was the voice? "Smarter, not harder, kid," the mystery dude said. "Wearing yourself down to nothing isn't going to help her." The guy had military written all over him. From his close-cropped haircut to the way he stood ramrod straight with his hands held in front of him. He was a big dude with about 10 pounds of muscle on Cam. He'd definitely be a challenge, but not impossible to take down. "I'm sorry," Cam said, sounding anything but. "I know who the women are because Ari told me about them. But who are you exactly?" He didn't appreciate the guy's implied insult to his intelligence. "And why the hell are you here? Ari doesn't even know who you are." "Calm down, hero," said the pretty blonde bohemian, who he figured was the artist Jamie Lennox. "We're all on the same side here. This," she said, placing a hand on the man's arm, "is Noah, and he's with me. He served in the army with my brother, Adam, who went off to go protect Ari from those shade things with Cass's cousin, Jean-Baptiste. And now they're both missing. All caught up now?" When Cam nodded reluctantly, she turned to Alvaro. "Have you seen the eagle and the bear?" "Well, that's certainly a weird question," Cam thought, confused. But Alvaro seemed to know exactly what she was referring to, because he nodded solemnly. "What was the last thing you saw?" "The red-eyed serpent won the battle." "Were they still alive?" Jamie asked, her voice full of both hope and fear. The bear was severely injured, but still holding on to life. Alvaro began patting his pockets as though he just realized he left his sketchbook back in the car. What about the eagle? Jamie asked with a fierce intensity in her eyes. The serpent swallowed it, Alvaro said. It looked as if he had just shattered Jamie's whole world with those 4 words. No, it can't be true. She finally managed to whisper before she buried her face in Noah's shoulder, and he wrapped her up in his arms. Cass sighed sadly, as though the bad news was something she had expected, but it was still hard to hear out loud. All right, what's going on? What the crap does all that mean? Cam asked, put on edge by everyone's intense reactions to the fate of some random animals. And what in the world would a bear lose, And in what world would a bear lose to a snake? How big was that freaking snake? Yes, what does it all mean? What does it have to do with Ari? Alvaro asked desperately. And Cam realized that even though Alvaro had seen it, he was just as lost as him. Cass stepped in front of Cam and Alvaro and took one of their hands in the firm grasp of each of hers and gave them a faraway contemplative look, where she was looking at them, yet somehow not. Okay. What's happening right now? What's she doing? Cam asked Alvaro out of the corner of his mouth. He looked over for some assistance from Jamie and Noah, but they were too caught up in their own little world of grief over eagles and bears to pay them any attention. Cass continued to look through them with a 1,000-mile stare, her thumbs tracing circles on the backs of their hands. No idea. I've never met another seer before, let alone one this powerful. Old Enzo told me every seer sees visions differently, so maybe she's trying to see what she can tell us without changing the possible outcomes, he said, glancing up at Cam with a shrug. Cass suddenly let go of their hands, and with a deep sigh, her eyes focused back on them normally, and she nodded. Then she went over to place a comforting hand on Jamie's back. It is not over, Jamie, she consoled in her beautiful, almost musical voice. Ari still has a chance to save them, if she's strong enough, which I have faith that she is. They will not be as they were, she warned, but they knew this was a possibility going in, and they accepted it. Jamie turned away from Noah's embrace and nodded as she wiped her eyes, still mourning but putting her trust in Cass's words and Ari's strength. Cam was still confused. Cass suddenly closed her eyes again and started speaking in strange riddles. Wheels upon wheels, all set into motion ages ago, are turning and merging together at last. She spread her fingers out and slowly rotated her hands so that her fingers interlocked together, like the teeth of 2 gears. It was a pretty impressive feat with her eyes being closed. Wrongs must be righted, the hidden must be revealed, and the chosen must come together to ascend. What now? Cam asked, completely lost. Alvaro, Noah, and Jamie all shushed him at once. Cam held up his hands in silent apology. Just asking for a little clarification, zeesh. Cass opened her eyes. In order for us to be reunited with the ones we seek, she continued, we must first find the fallen angel. You mean he's a real person? Jamie asked, aghast. When you said my sculptures were visions of Ari's life, I assumed that one had to be symbolic, she said, making big sweeping gestures with her hands. She had a very expressive way of talking. In a way it was, and in a way it wasn't. Well, of all the cryptic, Jamie muttered in frustration, swallowing the curse words she had really wanted to say after Noah put a steadying hand on her shoulder. Cam had a sinking suspicion he knew who Cass was referring to. The image of a gnarly scar going through a rune that looked like wings flashed into his mind. And Ari's explanation of what that rune was and how it got that way wormed through his brain, forcing his hands to clench into tight fists as his anger and indignation grew. No, Not him. He's not a fallen angel in the traditional sense, Cass began diplomatically. He's not an angel in any sense, Cam spat out. He's a selfish, arrogant, lying bastard. He spun on his heel and angrily paced away, feeling the urge to kick over one of the mossy, weathered tombstones to let out his pent-up aggression. Instead, he quickly turned back, needing to make Cass see reason. He abandoned Ari just when she needed him the most. What makes you think that'll help her now? Cass gave Cam a look of stern patience. Because there is much we do not see below the surface of things. The tone of her voice and the way she stared at Cam like a disappointed Sunday school teacher almost made him feel bad about his harsh judgment. Almost. Hey! Leave your sister alone. Yeesh. And, Cass continued, because our objectives are not mutually exclusive. He needs our help as much as we need his. And that was the end of chapter 29. How very exciting indeed. Worlds are colliding. All the tendrils of the storyline are starting to come close to each other. Alrighty. I'm going to go break up those two squabbling sisters and go on to the next chapter. Whoop, whoop. Whoop, whoop. Thank you for joining for chapter 29 of Catalyst by Lisa Beeson. Peace.